So I'm going to keep this introduction short. What we'll hear in the arc of our conversation is more about our sister. If there's a more brilliant scholar in her generation, I'm not aware of him or her. And we're going to hear a lot more about her, but I'm just going to give you a few bio specs. Dr. Sheneese Thompson, daughter of Philadelphia, went to Howard University, got her bachelor's in Afro-American Studies, went off to Boston University, got a master's in Afro-American Studies, and then went off to the Ohio State University to get a PhD in the field, making her one of the few in any generation to have all of her formal academic training in the field and discipline of Black Studies or Africana Studies. Equally important, she is an accomplished scholar. She's the editor of Journal Freedom still, right? All right, very good. At the Baltimore School for Colored Teachers. No, I think they got another name now. Bowie State University. And we were able to recruit her here to Howard University. Has it been 2 years?
This is the beginning of my second year.
Oh, my God. Yeah, recruit her back. As I said, her arc comes through this institution. She's part of the Sankofa family, having worked under the dictatorship of Haile Grima while she was an undergraduate. The benevolent dictatorship of Haile Grima. And also, I have to say this in by way of beginnings, Sheneese, as long as we've known each other, which is kind of a long time
Almost
now.
20 years now.
It's crazy. We had a little program in Philadelphia called Philadelphia Freedom Schools, and Sheneese showed up because her school was literally across the street from the school district headquarters in North Philly. And from the first moment that I saw her, and then she opened her mouth, I was like, oh yeah, this is the one right here. It's always in the spirit. She has been a steadfast, devoted daughter of Africana intellectual genealogy. And when she wrote her dissertation, was it Lemonade and Other Yellow Things?
Yes.
Yeah, Lemonade and Other Yellow Things. She previewed what you have in your hands tonight, Oshun, Lemonade and Intertextuality, Afro-Atlantic Religion and Black Cultural Production. She calls herself an Africana Studies scholar with a concentration on contemporary popular culture, but that does not even begin to capture what she does and what she has done in this book. And the rest of it will come out in the arc of our conversation. So without any further ado, Dr. Sheneese Thompson, Oshun, Lemonade, and Intertextuality. We just give her a great round of applause. And since at the center of this institution is filmmaking, this is being recorded with film quality recording. So everybody watching this after, order your copy of this book from Sankofa. Do not go to the enemy, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. Get it here. And for everybody who has already ordered that Dr. Thompson's going to sign for tonight, you'll be getting your copy in the mail soon so you can rejoice. For the rest of you Negroes, come through here and get a copy here. Dr. Thompson.
Dr. Carr, how are you?
I'm choking up. You know how long we waited to be able to say that to each other? It's crazy, right? Even though them degrees don't mean nothing.
But we're here.
We are here. Okay, we're going to try to keep the shorthand short because I don't have any biological children. This is as close to a daughter as I have in the world. She is indeed my daughter. So we have a shorthand and y'all will miss the whole thing. So we're going to try to stop tonight before we even get started. All right, Dr. Thompson, you describe this as an autoethnography. She has mastered language, including all the academic language, which she kind of treats because you got to do that kind of thing in the academy. But don't get it twisted. This is plain language, genius work. What is autoethnography, and why do you call this project autoethnography?
Absolutely. So for those of you who are familiar with any kind of anthropological work, ethnography is the study of people, right? And it's a very particular practice where you are in a relationship with your subjects, which is designed to be objective, right? You are an observer and you are not in that community, you're not of that community, you're observing that community, right? Whereas autoethnography is the study of oneself or one's own community, which does not privilege any sense of objectivity, but rather is clear about needing to position yourself as in that community to be able to elucidate something that other people wouldn't know because they weren't, right? And so it's a little bit meta. And this book is very meta. I went back and read it and it's like, What are you doing?
Is it? Is
Yes, it is. In the sense that it is an autoethnography. I'm examining Lemonade, the visual album, as an autoethnography for Beyonce, the artist and the character in the context of the visual album. But this book is in some ways an autoethnography for myself, because to answer your next question, which I know is your next question, when I started writing this book, I was already a practitioner of African traditional religion, but I was what we call in the Leo, and I was not necessarily in the process of getting to be initiated or anything like that. And I tell you, it was Oshun moving. I needed to write a prospectus because I needed to write a dissertation. And I was driving back from the city of Philadelphia to Columbus the weekend that Lemonade debuted on HBO. And when I take that 6-hour drive, and I used to take it straight, I would be wired from the road, and I said, everybody on the internet's talking about this. I really ought to just watch it because people are saying it's good. Let's see if that's true. And I just happened to watch it for that reason. I said, oh, this is something. And that's how the dissertation got to be about this topic. It could have been anything, except it was this and it needed to be this, and it wasn't in my control because I wanted to write about everything and anything else. And so in some ways I'm writing about myself as somebody who's negotiating the insider-outsider dynamic of being an academic, of being a practitioner, of holding the tension between those two things as I'm doing academic work, giving honor to the traditions that I come from, and then also giving honor to academic space. It's a tension, and there are many of us out there who walk that tension to keep things sacred, and keep things academic, and then trying to find the marriage between those two things.
And you, as you write in the book, you didn't go nearly as deep as probably some people might have wanted you to go to reveal things that aren't appropriate in academic spaces or even public spaces in terms of ritual. But one thing, and I'm just thinking about it as we're getting into this, and then we're going to open it up to have conversations because believe me, I was saying a minute ago that you elevated Beyonce to a class status of intellectual that you said, no, I didn't. Yes, you absolutely did. I mean, if she thought about half the stuff that you connect in here, man, respect. But before we go any further, the protocol. Yes. You wanted to, we were debating what to do, whether to have a libation, to open, and then you suggested a way to open that I thought was picture perfect. So why don't you open the way formally for us?
Thank you. I want to read my dedication and my acknowledgement, so just bear with me. Dedication is very short. Acknowledgement is a little longer. Oshun yeye moro, Osha mina layeyo, eko. Oshun, mother who builds wealth, you selected me first to have the world. You educate. That's my dedication. And my acknowledgements, I would like to acknowledge Oludumare as God blessed me with the facilities, opportunities, and fidelity to complete this book. I would like to thank Arisha for their benevolence on my behalf. I would like to thank my mother, Abina Hollis, for her love, sacrifice, and unwavering support. I would like to thank her mother, my Nana, Thelma Hollis, for her wisdom, patience, and continued protection after her transition to becoming an ancestor. I would like to acknowledge all of my ancestors on my maternal line, the Sims, the Jameses, the Jacobs, the Hollises, who have passed on, as it is their shoulders on which I stand. I would like to thank my paternal grandparents, Regina and Holly Thompson, as well as my paternal ancestors, the Thompsons, Blackwells, and Nelsons, who have passed on, as it is they who have paved the way for me. I want to acknowledge my godmother, Ia Jerry, my Ajubona, Ia Diane, for all the spiritual and life lessons you have taught me. I'm eternally grateful. This book is especially not possible without the religious training you have imparted to me, as well as the reverence for Orisha and our traditions that I have learned along the way. Thank you specifically for your contributions to this project and encouraging me to keep going, but most importantly for accepting me as your goddaughter and for guiding me on the path of Orisha. I want to thank my godfather, Baba Joe, for his kind heart and protective nature, as well as my god brothers and sisters who continuously checked in on me during the writing process. I would like to acknowledge Sean Hunter, my wonderful editor, who saw potential in the project immediately and guided me through the process graciously. And last, I would like to acknowledge many people who are not named and yet indispensable in making this book.
So this book is a very compact book. It's so rich theoretically, and yet the attention to detail, as I said, just bringing a book of an introduction, 4 chapters, and a conclusion. A book where you take on not just Beyonce's oeuvre, but also She's Gotta Have It, the remake, Daughters of the Dust, of course, which should have some particular resonance here in the Sankofa space, and also Jamaica Kincaid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why don't we, well, why don't we start with not only how you came to this subject, but how you enter it as a practitioner? Because I'm wondering if you could have written the dissertation that you wrote and the book that emerged out of it at the beginning of your practice that you wrote near the time when you published this. Could you have written this when you started? It's so rich in terms of explication, and we'll get into that in terms of how she connects these traditions.
Yes and no, because much of this was written at the beginning.
Right.
Much of this was written at the beginning, and much of it was not. And it was very interesting because one of the things my godmother asked me, like in hindsight, looking back on it, like, is there anything that I don't agree with or would take back or do something with now that I'm on the other side of things? I'm like, it's remarkable how much I still stand by this book. And I think so much of that is true because I wasn't necessarily writing about the religion as practice as much as I was writing about the religion as philosophy. And that's a little different in the philosophy stance, right? So there's the beautiful thing about African ways of life is that there are not these very stringent lines between sacred and secular. These are life ways, right? These are ways of knowing. And so digging into the philosophy of Yoruba ways of knowing touches very much on the religion and ritual of Yoruba practitioners, but it's not exclusive to that. So the answer to your question is yes and no. I needed to have written it in both timelines. I hope that helps.
Very much so. I mean, but you know, it's interesting. The broad category is Yoruba, and you coined a term in here in terms of epistemology. I hope you'll explain for us.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is also very heavily invested in kind of giving us a roadmap through Lukumi.
Yes.
So, for those who don't know, could you make the distinction between those two, or if there's a distinction to be made, and kind of how that
Absolutely.
informs?
Yes. I'll start with Lukumi and then work back. So the Yoruba tradition has a diaspora all its own, right? And so, of course, we start in Oyo or Ile Ife, or there's a lot of contention around this.
Depending on me, when she gets into Oshun and how that city came up for her. I mean, it's all these
there's
all these origin
there.
cities.
Exactly right. But all that to say, in Nigeria, right, among the Yoruba-speaking peoples.
Well, I have to pause here. Those of you who are practitioners, you probably going to be a little disturbed tonight because Sheneese is so disrespectful. I'm just kidding. No. One of the centerpieces of this book is your ability to see multiple perspectives and not have them fighting each other.
I don't
We're going to
want
talk about
anybody
gender.
fighting.
We're going to talk about. It's fascinating to see because some of the people in this book will fight each other.
And I don't want anybody fighting.
And she don't want nobody to fight, so everything is reconciled. So I just wanted to say that. Go ahead, please.
All of that to say,
Yes.
unfortunately, there was a European incursion on Africa. Fortunately for us, what that meant is that the Yorubas went out into the world. I write another article on this about how the Yorubas make up like the lowest percentage of Africans taken from West Africa during the slave trade. There were very few of them, but they came late. And then there was like a cultural hegemony that followed. Wherever the Yorubas went, Orisha went. And then despite the fact that the Congos and the Angolans were the numerical majority, the Yoruba culture kind of pervaded the space. So that's true in Brazil, and it's absolutely true in Cuba. And so Lukumi comes to the United States during the mid-20th century, the 1950s, through those Afro-Cubans and Cubans who were coming from Cuba to the United States, fleeing the island. And so what's very interesting for African-American practitioners of Lukumi in particular is that many of those people would have been initiated by Cubans. Right. There are many African-American Lukumi houses now. Right. For example, I come from an African-American Lukumi house, but my godmother's godfather is Cuban. Right. So it's a very interesting intersection. There's been a lot of conversation these days about ideas around cultural purity, if African Americans should be doing something like getting initiated in Africa or doing something that is Isheshe. I don't have a position on it in terms of what's right and what's wrong. I think all of those life paths and approaches to God are valid and valuable. I just know that Lukumi is one of the ones that came from Cuba and pervaded in the way that it did because of the time when it came, because it was coming here in the 1950s. The population of Cubans ticked up. The 1960s happened for Black Americans, and then the 1970s happened for Black Americans, which made them turn toward Africa. And what happened was that there was a great gift from the Afro-Cubans and Cubans who were here, allowing Black Americans to access Africa through religion, through Lukumi. Right? So I make the distinction in the book because I'm a Lukumi practitioner, and there are distinctions, geographical and otherwise, between Candomblé in Brazil, Lukumi in Cuba and Lukumi in the United States. There's a distinction there as well as Isheshe and Ifa, right? There are some distinctions, not differences. Yeah.
So let's use that as the point of entry for how you frame this text. Oshun sits at the center of this text. You read her through the broader kind of system, but also differently through Lukumi. Can we talk a little bit about gender and how you frame this in terms of from Olodumare and then the Orisha, and then they leave her out, but then you read why and maybe how. Talk a little bit about how Oshun becomes the center of this text and how it
Absolutely. So Oshun had to be the center of the text. There was nothing I can do about it. I was not in charge. And so I hope that makes sense. I hope it makes sense, and I hope that helps. All that to say, he's referencing chapter 2, where I spend a lot of time talking about the Odu Ose Torah, which is where the Arumole, which is the 16 Orisha who come down to make Earth habitable for human beings before Obatala molds the physical form of human beings. And Oludumare gives them the task of molding the planet Earth and putting things in the correct order so that human beings can live and thrive in this environment. And Oshun is among them. And she is the only female among them, and she is the youngest among them. Both of those things are true. And so as they go about their work, they leave her out of this, and things are not going well. And they return to Olodumare and say, hey, what's happening here? Why aren't things working? And he said, I sent 16 and I'm only seeing 15, so that might be a problem. Why don't you start there? And so they go and they plead with Oshun, like, hey, we're sorry we left you out. Can you please help us? And she goes, maybe. I'm with child, and if the child is a girl, I'm not helping anything or anybody. Too bad, so sad. And if it is a boy child, I will help you. Congratulations. Turns out it's a boy child. The Pataki around this is called the 17th Odu because in this case, it's the birth of Eshu.
And Pataki is coming from Lukumi.
Pataki is a term, yes, that we use for the stories that are associated with the Odus of Ifa. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So
absolutely. And so all that to say, there's a number of different ways to read that Pataki, right? The Pataki is about exclusion, and the exclusion, the kind of exclusion really wouldn't matter because the lesson there is why don't we not leave people out? I think that there are purists who would like to say in one way or the other that this is very specifically about age. I'm thinking about Oyeronke Oyewumi, who is suggesting that in pre-colonial Africa, gender is not an organizing feature of society. Okay, fine, that's her position. What I'm saying is that one of the beautiful things about the Odu Ifa is that it grows and expands, and so that we can apply this to contemporary circumstances where gender is in play, right? And those two things are not mutually exclusive. Because she is young and she is a woman, and what happens when we take both of those things into consideration. So, I mean, I thought it was a really relevant allegory for how women are very often treated in this society, which does two things, which are important to me. One, elucidate the problem, but two, give a pathway toward reconstructing harmony, because that's the part that usually gets left out. I think as a society, we are very astute at identifying problems, and I think we can be very lazy about identifying solutions. Yeah.
So now let's then will you introduce to us the women who walk on top of the earth, either real or fictional, who carry that Oshun energy, and why you selected them to kind of carry this narrative through each chapter?
You know something, and I'm gonna say it again. And for those who get it, you get it. I feel
messed
like
up again.
I'm not saying that. It just feels like they chose me.
Yeah.
And I think part of it, and everybody has a different kind of research process. I kind of just read until I can't read anymore, and then things. I don't know. There's a meme on the internet from Always Sunny in Philadelphia where he's got this board of all this stuff and he's tying all the string together, making all the connections. And that's a little bit how my brain is. And so I was just reading all the things that even felt remotely relevant until those connections started to feel.
You see, as is my child. This is the way. That's the way you do it. That's right.
And so
just unruly in college.
Well, I think for me, and you would probably agree, I know the connections are there. I need enough information so that I can show other people that they're there. And that's two totally different processes. And so that's a little bit how it came to be. But one of the other things, which is why I say it's pretty meta, that I was trying to establish is that Beyonce is in a very long intellectual genealogy of women who have done this kind of storytelling. This isn't novel, right? No pun intended. So then when I'm looking at this work, I'm trying to establish what are the conventions of this genre. I'm establishing this genre as Black women writing toward healing using African spirituality as a mechanism. There are conventions in this genre. Oshun is all up in it. every time. And it doesn't matter the medium, which is why I weaved my way through different mediums to establish the fact that this is a standing convention in a subgenre of African American or Black literature that Black women are using to explore what are the possibilities for healing and reconciliation when we turn our face toward Africa. I think that is how I got there.
Okay. Now, the healing isn't exclusive to females. You reject the idea that this should be read as a feminist text.
I do reject that.
And you, by reading Beyonce, you're looking at her making moves that ultimately are for the healing of the whole community.
That's right.
And when y'all read this section, as you can imagine, by her and Jay-Z, you will see exactly what I mean. Could you talk a little bit about the centering Beyonce, but also Daughters of the Dust, also Jamaica Kincaid, and then the gestures you make toward people like Ntozake Shange, for example.
Absolutely. So I think what it is for me is that feminism is very narrow, right? One of the reasons why I rejected it is that it's very easy to suggest that an energy or the mythology or the myth history that is affiliated with a deity like Oshun is feminist in nature, but I think that's very narrow, and I think it collapses what happens because Oshun does not just protect women and femmes. Oshun protects the entire environment, right? All the creatures in it. And so feminism becomes a very narrow way to look at the way that energy functions in the world. And so I thought that was also a very narrow way to look at what was happening in these texts, right? Which is to say harm against women and femmes is harm against the entire economy. It is harm against the entire civilization. And that's what that Pataki tells us, right? Oshun represents fresh water. You finna do something without water? What did Fela Kuti say?
Got no enemy.
that doesn't function, right?
Yes.
And so if we understand that women and men, or masculine and feminine archetypes, right, coming away from gender, right? Masculine and feminine archetypes are indispensable to each other, right? And we can have a very different conversation about what does it look like to make sure those things are in balance and harmony. What I'm talking about in the second chapter, which is where he's referencing, is the pathway back toward stasis or alafia. Something is wrong here, and it has to be fixed, right? There's a lot of different ways to do this, and I talk about this in the context of the book, but divination is seeking to find out what the problem is, but also how to fix it, right? And the fixing is back in the balance, right? And that balance means that the masculine and feminine energies are working in tandem and not in an antagonistic dynamic. Yeah.
So let's get right down to the text that kind of anchors the whole thing, which of course is Lemonade. And by the way, and we'll open this up to questions in a couple of minutes, but I must say that the gestures that you make really in chapter 4, only kind of gesture to you talk about Nefertiti and passing, but then chapter 4 just gives a peek at what I want to see as one of the next book projects, because what I didn't say is that Dr. Thompson is one of the first students at Howard to take Dr. Mario Beatty's Metanetra class. So she does Egyptian hieroglyphs, and so the connections there. What is it, Hemech, I think?
Nekbet.
Nekbet.
And
yes.
Ibukole.
Yeah, see. I mean, there are the connections. See, you got to make between women, water, and then go all the way back to ancient Egypt. So we just got to make sure that they don't kill her by teaching too many classes over there and hide away, because that's what happens. A lot of the stuff gets left on in the classroom, which she loves. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about your work in terms of bleeding egg technology and all this kind of thing. You may want to ask her about IT stuff. She does that kind of work as well. No, is it IT or AI? See, I'm old. AI, yes. African intelligence applied to the devilish moment of artificial intelligence, which is absolutely artificial. But Lemonade, everything you've just laid out for us, without going too far into it, because people need to buy this book and read it, because again, we're not going to do it justice here. You use Lemonade to read this whole conversation. Could you talk to us a little bit about how Lemonade kind of illustrates these things you've laid out?
Yes, I want to take a moment and shout out Warsan Shire. She's a Somali British poet, and she was fantastic before Lemonade, but a lot of her poetry got adapted to the story, which ultimately becomes Lemonade. And there was something there in terms of the way that she was using language to articulate a distinctly Black and a distinctly feminine experience. And Lemonade did something which I thought was, I used the language synecdoche, right? Part representing whole. There was something very particular that seemed, and I could be interpreting this differently, but it seemed to me that the entire project of Lemonade, which is not limited to Beyonce, everybody involved, they were looking to use Beyonce as a character as a single part representing a whole, and that whole being Black women, right? And these variety of experiences that you can have. And not just black women and girls, right? And I think that's how I got to it being the centerpiece, because it was the result of the work of all the other things that are there, right? Like Lemonade can't happen without Daughters of the Dust, without Intozaki Shanjay, Sassafras, Cypress, and Indigo. Like it was almost like it was the trunk of a tree that had really a whole bunch of roots. And I think I started with Lemonade as the centerpiece because people can see the tree. And my work in doing this book was to show them the roots. I hope that makes sense.
So in showing those roots, water at the center of this. We haven't yet mentioned Yemaya, so maybe in passing you can talk about that. And when I asked you before about epistemology, you developed this term Oshun epistemology.
Yeah.
You're making some real distinctions between Oshun and Yemaya, but at the same time, water plays this role. Could you use Lemonade as a point of entry and water and how that's kind of...
Absolutely. So the distinction, I'll start with Oshun epistemology. So epistemology talks about knowledge, right? What is knowledge and how do we determine what is knowledge, right? And so what I'm suggesting is that I guess by default, each of these Orisha in this pantheon has an epistemology associated with their myth history, right? And I'm applying the myth history of Oshun to analyze these texts, right? I suspect, I haven't done it, but I suspect it could be similarly done with Yemaya or Shango, right? Because all of them have a certain amount of knowledge embedded in their experiences as Orisha, and for some of them, their human lived experiences before they became Orisha that can be applied. That's what the practice is. To apply they went through that, so we didn't have to go through that. That's the whole project. You look, you listen, you read. And so if I can read the fact that all 15 of these Orisha left Oshun out, why don't I just not do that in my world? Because it seems like there are consequences and repercussions for that behavior, right? And so what I'm asserting is that it doesn't necessarily have to be limited to religious practice. This is just African philosophy, right? And that's how we get to an Oshun epistemology. Also, like you said in the beginning, the academy makes you use words and jargon, right? But it was really important to me to write a book that I thought people could read. That was important to me. So I do try to hold the tension between satisfying the academy with jargon and fanciful neologisms. Yeah. Yeah. And then also just writing a book that people can read. But to come to the water part of your question, there is something central about water in all of these texts, right? There's also something central about water and life, right? And I don't think that there's a need to overthink that. I think that we can just look at that and then say, how is this applicable in other places? One of the things that I think is super beautiful about indigenous ways of knowing is that human beings in those systems do not see themselves as apart from nature. They don't see themselves as having dominion over nature. They see themselves as in nature and natural. And so I think that if you apply that to what's happening in the context of these narratives or what's happening in the context of this world, then you're able to see that if we use water and how water functions as an allegory, then we can start to see what else is indispensable in this world and how might I move like water, or what would happen if we didn't have any. Right? Like all of those things are questions that I think are important to be answered. And because water functions as a foundation of all of these texts, I think that it was really important. Fresh water too, right? Mm-hmm. And so the distinction comes in the context between Oshun and Yemaya because fresh water is what's here, right? And in the Lukumi system, which is not necessarily true of the Isheshe system or the Ifa system, Oshun comes to represent fresh water where Yemaya comes to represent salt water, right? And those are different. Those are distinct, which is not the same as different.
So, chapter 2, like you said, which you said is your favorite chapter.
It's my favorite chapter.
I don't have a favorite. It's all, it's all the way through. I was saying that.
I don't know if anybody here is a creative of any kind, but like we do work, you write, you read, some stuff you like, I guess it's okay. It's legible, fine. But every now and then you do something, you're like, oh, I ate with that. And so it's the feeling I get when I read chapter 2, where I was like, you threw 10 bowls in the air and caught them all. Good for you, girl.
That's true. That's true. Absolutely true. I thought it was interesting because, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it may be a kind of brutal reading of it, but in chapter 2, you're grappling with Beyonce working through her own challenges, her family, her parents. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful how you enter the conversation and nobody gets thrown away. You talk about the complicated relationship with her father, who she loves so much, and then how some of that shows up in a relationship with her husband. But then you walk through Lemonade. And I'm thinking about this because, one thing she does brilliantly is engage with young people. And of course, they talk about Beyonce all the time. And you say you're not writing this as a stan, even though you appreciate her talent. But in the process, in chapter 3, I almost read that more like almost like a social kind of framing. Like,
absolutely.
But that opening scene, because I'm not a Beyonce, I mean, I watch, I don't know, nobody come for me. I'm just saying. But I'm just saying as a prelude to this, that's the opening scene. Is it in Formation where she's on top of that police car?
That's right.
Talk us a little bit about maybe that. That's more chapter 3 maybe than 2, but then also the relationship between she and Jay-Z and how you use the Oshun epistemology to read that in a way that young people who are always talking about it might say, oh, this is a revelation. This is more than just us talking about this on the internet.
That's so important. So one of the things that I tried to do was move from part to whole in the context of the book in terms of Beyonce as an individual and as a character, but then also in terms of how she saw herself embodying the energy. One of the things that's incredibly important to know about Oshun as a goddess, as a deity, as an energy, is that this is actually about social order. Right? There are things that people associate immediately with Oshun: vanity, beauty, sensuality. All those things are true. But one of the other things that's very, very important to Oshun is social order, right? And so one of the things in terms of that scene of Beyonce being on top of that police car and sinking that car into the water has a lot to do with the fact that one thing that Oshun does not tolerate is ugliness. And she means it in the sense of character. Right, she means it in the sense of injustice, and so the subversion and the submersion of the car in that water has a lot to do with how Oshun's children should be functioning in society. Should, I'm not saying always do, but it has a lot to do with this idea of social justice and how Oshun's energy flows towards social justice and how that work gets done. And all of the Orisha kind of function in a way that how is society going to be in direct order? But each of those energies have a different approach. And so essentially what I'm associating with Beyonce here is that she is modeling Oshun's daughter's approaches to social justice. And one can't happen without the other. Because the other thing that Oshun does not tolerate is selfishness, right? And so one of the things that I learned, right, as a child of Oshun, if you give, you will always have something to give. And this idea of creating a sense of stasis in her own life so that she can put that energy toward creating stasis in society is what I was getting at.
In respect to this space, of course, Julie Dash being a member of this extended family of creatives that Holly and Shree Kareem are part of. In Daughters of the Dust, it's very interesting. You do a reading, which you say, is it, let me correct me if I'm wrong, you say Julie Dash is kind of positioning Yellow Mary, and you probably also help us understand why yellow in Oshun and as well. But you read, she's reading her more as Yemaya. You're saying, no, there's something really Oshun that's centering this. Could you talk a little bit about how Daughters of the Dust plays into your?
There is a lot here. I'm going to do my best. Okay.
But you gotta get the book. These are teasers. You notice she ain't really get into that Jay-Z Beyonce thing. You have to read the book for that. But go ahead.
It's because
I keep trying to get her to do it. She
it's trite. Here's what I will say.
It's absolutely not trite. This ain't internet stuff. This is a very different kind of thing. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so there's a lot here. So Daughters of the Dust is a beautifully shot film, which is Pan-African in its approach. Now, you can read that as an achievement or a spec depending on where you are in the dynamic. I say that to say Julie Dash does right in terms of her own perspective that she reads Yemaya more into Yellow Mary. But when you look at Yellow Mary's backstory in terms of the kind of abuses that she faced, it really lines up a lot more with Oshun's lore. But then also when Yellow Mary enters into the scene, right, because she comes on this boat, the song that's playing is for I Got You, right? Which is the Orisha who is a protector of journey people, right? And one of the very interesting things, which is very subtle, I don't know how many of you have seen it very recently, but when she sees Nana present, she's got a charm. She's like, who that charm? And he's like, it's my St. Christopher charm. And he's like, he protect you? And she said, yes. But interestingly enough, I Got You is synchronized with St. Christopher, right? So there's a lot there in the sense of, okay, you might have been reading Yemaya into this, but you present her a little bit more like a daughter of Agayu, and this lore is like got Oshun all over it, right? So I don't know that the text, meaning the movie, provides enough textual evidence to support this Yemaya connection. I think that it might have been more in her mind than in the context of the film, which is absolutely fine. And it's not necessarily a criticism, it's just my reading of it. And there's a lot here. So in the New World, right, when we think about how Oshun gets characterized differently from Yemaya, one of those things is absolutely a color dynamic, right? In the New World, Oshun is very typically described as a mulattress or a fairer color, where Yemaya is described as dark skin, fully African features, right? That's one thing. Yemaya is much more closely associated with mothering and motherhood and nurturing, whereas Oshun is associated with the all the pain and pleasure associated with womanhood, which is not the same thing as the role of motherhood. And when we are interacting with Yellow Mary in the context of the story, we are interacting with all the pain and pleasure associated with womanhood, all of it, right? So I think that is where my reading comes in, which does not usurp or displace, Julie Dash's associations with her own work. It just was, as a viewer and an analyst, that's where I landed.
2 more questions, and then we're going to open it up. So people, as y'all are thinking we're going to have this conversation, we could be talking like this all night, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about other things that you try to disentangle these linear notions of time and space from the way that African people move through the world.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that, maybe even in the context of She's Gotta Have It, and how these contemporary expressions, and I think you write that as far as any of us know, Beyonce is not an initiate. She's not, and it doesn't have to be.
Right.
Yeah, and in fact, nobody has to be. And yet, them coming to this, maybe it's Black is King. I'm trying to remember where you say that, but there are commitments that should be made. You can just be playing around with this stuff.
That's right.
Where do those things converge in a project like She's Gotta Have It? Not the film for all us old people who saw it as a movie first, but the Netflix series that
It's
you write
so
about.
funny.
No, it's so true. I'm like, wow.
This whole thing has been nonlinear, because you started with the question of, I've written this book, then now, and I'm like, I had to write both books in both timelines. And so the same thing is true of She's Gotta Have It in terms of the first iteration and the second. We are all in the multiverse. That's what's happening right now. And so I am not a quantum physicist, but there's a lot of Afrofuturists who are working in the space of quantum understandings of time. And I think that's the shortest cut to get where I was going, in the sense that time is progressing, but that doesn't mean that it's in a line. I hope that makes sense, right? I kind of saw it this way, right? Because there are cycles here, some of which are needing to be repeated, some of which are needing to be broken, but they are all moving toward progression forward. So when I think about She's Gotta Have It, I think about all the work that went into Spike Lee and his community, thinking about what does Nola Darling look like as a character for this generation, how that looks different. And I also think about that cultural moment, because one of the things that kind of brought me to this topic is that I just observed between 2015 and 2016 this huge influx of representation of African spirituality in radio, TV, film, music, books, right? One of the things that Dr. Carr and I have in common is that we like superheroes. And in 2015, they did a TV adaptation of Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger is originally set in Boston. They moved it to New Orleans, and it was voodoo all through it. I said, excuse me?
She called me like, did you see it? I
said, what's going on here? So that was actually, I think, the canary in the coal mine, because Marvel, what? That's just not their approach to things, right? And so I just was like, if it's here, it's everywhere. And it's just a matter of looking and connecting the dots. And I think in my first attempt to write this book, I was trying to figure out what was the catalyst, right? And I couldn't necessarily identify a catalyst. My godmother says it happens every 25 years or so, just as a cyclical thing where people kind of come to it and it becomes very popular. Then it kind of goes underground again and then it comes back. So we were just, I guess, in that 25-year cycle. But she's got to have it showed up in that timeline. And I think had something to say about what would it have looked like to be a young woman in Brooklyn in 2016. Absolutely, you would have been encountering practitioners of African traditional religion in whatever iteration. And I think to have left it out would have been a very flat depiction of New York at that time. So I think it was important that it's included in the sense that it's a fuller picture of what New York is in terms of a diasporic place, in terms of ways of knowing and cultural understandings, but also just I think at the crux of any project, you kind of want it to be relevant. And I think that piece was incredibly relevant for the time that it debuted.
All right, this is my last question. So, well, yeah, as you were talking, I thought about something else. Maybe I can make them work together. As you were writing about Black is King, I'm wondering two things. One, how do you perceive Beyonce continuing to, I don't want to say grow or develop, but deepen her kind of connections and maybe even be more deliberate? Maybe it's unintentional, but you read, certainly as you read Black is King, it seems very intentional in that way. And how do you explain or how do you interpret this kind of explosion of African spirituality and spiritual practices, particularly kind of as celebrities begin to gravitate toward that? And then we're going to open it up.
I don't know that I have an explanation for it, and I don't know what to make of Beyonce's journey and perhaps visit. I'll use the language visit into Africa, African spirituality, Africana at large, iconography, and all those things. Because I don't want to draw meaning which may not be there. I think it had meaning for people who viewed it, which can't be dismissed, but I'm not going to project meaning for it onto her because I don't know that lady. And so I don't know that I can make any sense of it. And I think the criticisms that came from it are all valid, but that's just not what I was interested in exploring because it meant something to people, and I just was interested in that.
I mean, criticism from practitioners?
From practitioners, from continental Africans, from Black Americans, from Caribbean. I mean, it ran the gamut, right? Because her and her husband are both naked capitalists, right? And so there was something about that cultural moment which could have been capitalized on, and quite frankly was, right?
You draw a distinction between another celebrity. Which one is it?
Oh, goodness gracious.
Azalea Banks, right? Okay. She said, no, I shouldn't get into that. Okay, she writes about it. Y'all should read it. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please, go finish your thought, and then we go.
All I'm saying is that 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 things can be true at the same time, coming back to this quantum understanding of time and space, which is, yeah, this moment was absolutely capitalized upon in the truest sense of that word, meaning money was made and a moment was seized. But it also meant something to communities who have for so many years not been positively represented in that space. Right. So I just kind of wanted to stay with meaning making because that's where I do most of my work. And so that's the work that I did. But I do think that everybody who was like, why are you now doing neo-colonization to Africa, Beyonce, and you didn't even tour there? I mean, that was just a valid criticism. I have nothing to say to those folks. I think that they were on the right path in terms of that layer of criticism. But I think what was more important to me is that it was important to people. And it kind of didn't matter to me whether it was or how it was important to her. Because the book is not about her. The book is about Oshun. And how she got to be a vessel for Oshun's work in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So can we ask people?
Please.
Very good. And then we're going to then move to signing our book sign. In Kemet, in Aswan, finally, about 2 months ago, he said, you can't sign my book till we in the Nile Valley. So we did that because Sheneese part of the team. We take folk to Kemet first 2 weeks of every August, and this was our first chance to do that. And so you can imagine there was water in the Nile and water in our faces. But you're gonna get y'all's book signed tonight. But let's go. Oh, you got one? Oh, thanks. Okay, yeah, y'all jump on in.
Thank you. My name is Brian Morrison. I'm a teacher at Big Bad Blue Senior High School. And I teach AP African American Studies down there. And fortunately, we're working on syncretism of African religions and the African diaspora right now. And that's why I wanted to be here to to ask you a couple of questions about that, and two questions in particular. One you've just answered, and I just want to be clear on that. So Beyonce did not, you don't know or you don't think she went into this venture with her lemonade with the same kinds of thinking that you have about the Orisha and Oshun and that kind of thing? Was that there? Was there someone on her team who had that?
I mean, she has an incredible team of people around her, researchers, historians. I don't know is the answer. Okay. And I'm hesitant to project anything onto it. Okay. I think she must know something. I say plainly throughout the text that she comes from Louisiana. Louisiana is a very particular space in terms of African ways of knowing and meaning making in terms of how they approach Africa in a spiritual perspective. So there must be something there. She identifies herself as a Creole, which tells me a lot about what she might already have known in terms of African spiritual practices in that area of the world. What I'm saying is she has not herself come out and said, I am a practitioner of this or that or the secret third religion. And what I was saying is I don't know that I find it strictly necessary in terms of the work that was done here. I know why people would like to see it because it's validating in a very particular way, and our culture is not a costume. But I think that the work is still meaningful whether she is or not.
Right. So my second question, I need some help with my teaching. I'm trying to help my students understand, really understand the most important key concepts of traditional African religion so that they can see those things still existing in our lives, our lived experience today. Can you give me something from your book or from the video album that I could use in my classroom to help the kids really understand the syncretism between traditional African beliefs and what's happening in the world today? Absolutely.
One of the things that I start with all the time, and I teach a film class now, and I said this to my students because we did a section about how this is getting represented in various films. We watch Brazilian films, we watch Ghanaian films, we watch American films where African traditional religions were represented. And one of the things that my students were completely shocked by is that at least in the Yoruba sense, African traditional religion is monotheistic. And it's one of the reasons why it can be syncretized with something like Christianity in the first place, right? There's one God. And then we have these Orishas who are benevolent energies, emissaries of God, who are sent to help us, which is why they can get synchronized so very easily with saints in the Catholic tradition, right? So I think that's a place to start. But I think the other thing, too, which is helpful if you're trying to work with young people and help them understand African systems of belief, at least in the Orisha sense, many of these Orishas lived human lives. And the whole function of that is so that humans could access them, right? They do not ask for perfection. They ask for you to read the thing, know the thing, and not fall into the same pitfalls that they did because now you have tools and resources that they didn't have so that you could do better with your life, right? It's all about alignment and being your best who you are, not being the best who that is. It's all about you, right? And I think that's another thing that's incredibly helpful. And I think the other thing is just to show them where it is in the world. So there is a visual album called Lemonade. It's absolutely all over Black Panther, right? The first one and the second one. And so it's just places where it lives naturally. Some of their favorite artists, what's the one? 21 Savage? Some of their favorite artists are out and proud practitioners of these religions. So I think just kind of showing it to them where they live is helpful. Yeah. You're very welcome.
As we continue, the next question, I want to bring a couple other pieces into it and maybe get your commentary on it. The thing that's everywhere that everybody's talking about, they get the African spirituality immediately, and I don't think there's any problem. Zinzi and Ryan Coogler centers.
Yes.
And then this is interesting. One of the things that Dr. Thompson did while she was working her way through school was write an important article about Harriet Tubman and talking about her and you're going to put on the money, this kind of thing. But in your book, you talk about Oshun's ability to help guide people home and water. So I'm wondering if Harriet Tubman could be a manifestation of Oshun.
You know something? There's something. Something's there around waiting in the water.
No question.
Something's there. And what he's
referencing
is that there's a patiki about Oshun falling down and literally becoming a river to lead people to Ido, which is a place name where the leader of that place is still named after Oshun because they were able to flee where they were to get to safety, following a river. How many human beings across time and space have followed a river to get to safety, right? So absolutely, I think there's Oshun in that. I think there's Gayu in that, and I think that Yellow Mary piece sees that. Right, in terms of that.
Any Sinners conversation, y'all get your hands up.
So much about Sinners. Ryan Coogler did a great job with that.
She got a hand up. Good.
Thank you so much for such a brilliant presentation.
Thank you.
sis. I'm wondering if you were to reset your analysis back to your phrasing that, there's part of your intellectual production that was there from the beginning, right? I do not study religion, but I've studied the camera as an instrument,
Sure.
right? And this idea of like the black box in the mirror, reflect, right? I'm wondering whether or not the tension that you have between African intelligence and artificial intelligence may offer something in the way of an answer to you about how, like, the impatience of justice agents may be speaking back to the problematic of, not necessarily Beyonce's tension around, not necessarily Beyonce's tension around the inability to answer the problematic of the fallen police car. We'll just kind of isolate it, right? But instead, like, the ways in which if we get a popular celebrity that can have enough people speaking back to the same context, then we can grab the instrument of the camera and put it in people's hands without it being there, right? So that we're reflecting sight without necessarily directing sight.
I agree with what you said. I don't know that I have an answer for that. I don't actually have a tension between African intellectual and artificial intelligence. He's making it funny. I'm very clear about what the difference between those two things are, and actually how one informs the other. I'm going to say something controversial, which I think most of the room will agree with. AI models the kind of intellectual exploitation that Africans in America have always been experiencing. That's right. Not somebody had a come to Jesus moment. So if we are clear that we live in a capitalist hellscape, then we can also be clear about how AI is functioning in that hellscape and how there's no exploitation in America which will not reflect the exploitation of black people. There isn't one, right? So I don't actually hold attention there. I do work which is about educational technology and being on the cutting edge of educational technology, meaning how do I have conversations like this with my students about the tool in the first place? Because everybody's like, oh, are they going to use it? Are they not going to use it? It's bad. They're cheating. It's like, no. We need to be having ethical conversations about this technology because the technology is here. So where are we going to place our students where they can be in this conversation to start building policy around how it should be used ethically? I mean, there's a lot of conversation to be had around the technology and the learning space right now. I'm not saying that I agree that we should just be generating images. I don't think that that's true. I think that is environmental danger. I also think that when we're dealing with something like environmental racism or even just the cost of living right now, people are very bent out of shape about the cost of electric. But the reason is because we're powering AI, right? So I am not blanketly against the concept of generative AI. I'm against how it's functioning in society because we're in a capitalist society and it's not being regulated. But generative AI could help us solve many societal problems if it was being used ethically. We're just not there yet. And unfortunately, the technology is moving much quicker than human beings, so I'm not sure it'll ever be regulated in a place that makes any sense. So I hope that helps.
Let's get a couple more. Man, this is excellent. This is a master class. We're getting a lesson tonight. Anybody? Oh, okay. Baba. Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm Baba Ogunsu Tito. I teach at the historic Paul Laurence Dunbar here in Washington. And I'm a part of the Carter G. Woodson Black Studies Academy. I taught AP African American Studies as well. So I love the concept that you're talking about when you're talking about the multiverse and how you exist in time in different points. I heard you talk about the past and the present. What do you project in that sense, in the context of the book?
What do you mean? Say it. Ask it in a different way.
Okay, ask it in a different way. You have referenced to this point how we got to this point.
Yes.
I'm asking you to speak to the next point.
I don't know. And I think we're on the precipice of a critical shift, and I don't know what's on the other side. And I don't want to pretend that I do. But I can say what I would hope.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Sure, okay.
I wasn't asking for the definitive, because if you was, I would ask you for the numbers, and I'd have gone out and played.
Okay. Yeah, I would hope that more people would access African philosophies in their multitudinous nature to apply their ways of knowing, their epistemologies to this moment, because the answers are there. And I think that, unfortunately, so much of the stigma around African traditional religions leaves people rejecting the wisdom, right, which is a mistake. There's so much philosophical complexity across the diaspora too, right? I've talked a lot about the cultural hegemony of Yoruba cultural and religious practice, but I mean, there's so much there, and I think that if people could get past the stigma of the religions, then they could see how much solution, right? I think I used the language solutions before. How many solutions are apparent in that way of understanding the world? And I would hope that people spent more time looking through those lenses to understand the problems that we're meeting today. That's what I would hope.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I hope there's a chance.
There's a chance. And can we talk a little bit about your process and how you center doing this intellectual work? I'm thinking about it, Bob, the way this conversation you all just had, and how this mouth-to-ear, life-to-life process has to be the center of the work. It's not just reading and writing, even though we invented reading and writing. It's got to be that life-to-life work. I'm thinking about it in particular. Think about Oshun. You write about these elements of Oshun, the mirror, the fan, and we were in Galveston on Juneteenth this past summer, and right there where they say General Order Number 3 was issued, Gordon Granger, and as the sun went down, they had this festival, and all these African people out there. And out of nowhere, I suppose everybody here has seen it at this point. I just had never experienced it like that. Somebody pulled out a fan, and everybody had a fan. Now it's boots on the ground. And you're right. I'm like, what the hell? You could write about that. You could watch a movie about that, or you could be in the space with these Africans from Texas.
Yeah.
Who, if you said Oshun, someone might say, yeah. I would say, what you talking about? That's voodoo. I'm going to church tomorrow. But these boots, what is the importance of, like, AI can't replicate that. It can make a movie about it. It can make you got virtual reality, but you have to, how important is it to be in a space to be able to kind of continue to extend this expression of African people, not just for us, but for the world?
I think that's the crux of the other ethnography piece, right? Like, you had to be there.
You had to be there.
You had to be there.
So these daughters of Oshun, I don't know, where's this fan coming from?
People might be upset. I'm sick of it.
Are you sick of it? No, I just want to know, because,
I'm sorry. I'm exhausted, and I'm willing to say that on a
did it come from the Africans? I know Continental Africans do that. You go to Africa.
Yeah, no, there's so many things that we do that are just fundamentally African. We cannot get around that. We just find new ways to be African every year.
She just answered your question, Major. We just find new ways of being
African every year.
Every year. My God, that's powerful. Anybody, come on, y'all want to get a couple more, and then we're gonna sign some books before she's gonna check back Philly tonight. Yes, ma'am. And then Nana, no, I'm coming to you next.
Thank you so much. This really was an absolutely brilliant presentation. I'd like to follow up on your last answer, which is kind of indigenous and African ways of knowing. I don't have your book in front of me. I'm going to get one, and hopefully you'll sign it. But for people who want to learn more, not necessarily because they want to be converted, but just because they want the knowledge, but also maybe if they want to be converted, are there resources in your book, or is there some place you can point people who are interested in doing deeper study?
So yes, Galveston has such beautiful books, and they need homes. And there's this section here, right in this last section of the bookshelf, which has a lot of resources here for you in the store, which you could buy. But I'm going to be honest, and this is a teacher's answer, the entire bibliography of this book is resources. Right? So I didn't write the book as a how-to guide in terms of how to learn more about the religion. you will invariably learn more about it by having read this book.
Sure.
But if you want to know even more than that, you can just look at the bibliography, and it's just a wealth of resources. Absolutely.
You mind saying the word as to how you came to it? I'm gonna give you this microphone so you can ask your question.
Yeah, I was Afrocentric in Philadelphia. The rest was history. It's a very short walk. It's right there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
What are we doing? So just to make the point about how we find new ways to be African every year. Yeah, and every summer, the second Sunday in June, there's the Odunde Festival, which is African American New Year. That's how it's referred to. I know Africans from the city of Philadelphia who've been to Odunde every year, have never missed it, and do not know that it starts with a procession to Oshun. They have no clue. They have no clue, right? Because people don't come at 12 noon. They come at 2, 3 once the people are out in the world. But the people in the whites were there putting oranges in the river before the rest of the Africans got there on their behalf. I'm just saying to you that depending on where you are in the world, it could be a very short walk to Orisha. So that's my comment. Yeah.
My ancestors say thank you to your ancestors.
Oh, thank you. Ashe.
At 61, which means sometime back in the 1970s, coming into African spirituality was a less direct route than I think you may have had benefit of.
Mm-hmm.
But I am absolutely astonished at looking at you.
Thank you.
I think we spend so much time complaining that a lot of times we don't see the grace of what progress has done.
Ashe.
I have not imagined a you in the 1980s at the University of Virginia when I ran into my first text on African religions and knew where I would be for the next 40 years. So I also want to give thanks to the elements that moved and shifted so that you could be.
Ashe.
And my question is that I don't know exactly how to phrase, so I'm going to play around with this word for a minute and hand this mic back very quickly, but I need to acknowledge that I don't have the information to make sure I pose the question correctly. But when you talk about Daughters of the Dust, the tension almost between the identity of Yemoja and Oshun, did you take into consideration those of us who have both?
Daughters.
Yes.
I didn't. That's a question.
You got it now? Oh, yes, ma'am, of course.
Come on, Two Waters. I see your head wrap. You didn't. But no, I didn't. That's a fantastic framing. So there's multiple ways to be right in this world. So yes, you're right. But that's just not what Jazz says. So I was rolling with what she said. But that's also an excellent interpretation, for sure.
Let's get one more and then, oh, please, I'm going to give you this one. Do you mind passing that back to her? Thank you. She's right. Thank you.
Hi. That's my teacher, y'all. Shout out to Dr. Thompson and Dr. Carr. Hi. I'm not really sure how I'm going to frame this question, but at least, one, I want to thank you for this talk and thank you for releasing your body of work and thank you for your knowledge and just being the woman that you are. You are absolutely phenomenal.
You're most welcome.
Yes.
I don't have a choice.
I guess my question is, when it comes to like, what do you expect from readers of like your book? Like when we engage in your text, I guess, what do you expect in regards to like, I guess what future research would look like or what future conversations would look like?
I'm so glad you asked that. This is why the young people are important. The children are our future, okay? Let me just go on to the page. Let me just go on to it. Amen?
Amen.
All right. It's important. Okay, so I wrote a little bit of a note to you for that. Finally, the transnational implications of Afro-Atlantic religion and the complexity of the cultural economy that exists between practitioners with varying access to information and materials and money would be worth exploring. After all, Beyonce herself was accused of having capitalist priorities in choosing to include Yoruba religious iconography and concepts in her work. I am particularly interested in questions like how the advent of the internet in conjunction with increased demand for information about Yoruba religions in the wake of Lemonade, She's Gotta Have It, and Black is King, economic and power dynamics between groups of practitioners internationally and on any given scale. Any of these questions represent ripe ground for continued interdisciplinary study. I have no expectations of you. I hope that you're just able to locate yourself in this work somehow. But there are things that if you're interested, I'm interested in.
Like, what's next?
Oh, I don't know. I have some ideas
All right. Well, we get to
about
what's
the
next.
multiverse.
Of course. Oh, preview. Yeah,
Don't say that. I got a student in the back who makes movies, and then he'll threaten me to make a movie.
I already said it. So let's thank Dr. Sheneese Thompson, Oshun Lemonade and Intertextuality. Will you sign some books?
I have to.
You will sign some books. You sold out, Jonathan. You got a handful. You sold out. That's a sellout. Yo, they got that. Because everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
Do you mind coming up, Jonathan, and closing us out a little bit, and perhaps even with some more information? Because Dr. Thompson does work here in the city. So if you order some, I don't know if you set up for pre-orders, but if as they come in, you don't mind coming over once in a while signing some, right? Okay.
No, not at all.
Thank you. Good.
I
Yes,
got
sir.
one. I
Yes,
got
sir.
one. So yes, thank you all for coming out. Another round of applause for our lovely guests.
No guessing. Y'all put her to work.
Yeah, y'all guests, but y'all also neighbors though. So
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
y'all neighbors. So yes, for those who still want to get copies, I do have book plates. So if you're willing, you can just sign those, and then we have another shipment coming in this week, and y'all can pick up. Just come to me at the counter. I'll take down your information. We'll contact you once the books have arrived. Otherwise, yeah. And if you have a book ticket, just come to the back and pick it up. We have all of those books separated.